Well, good morning, everybody. If you got a chance today, stick around for the end of this video. I'm going to talk about the differences in the sub-seasonal and seasonal forecasts from a year ago compared to the ones we've got this year. So we're going to talk about La Niña, and last year we were dealing with El Niño, and just the differences for the fall winter outlooks for both North and South America. But in the meantime here, to get this started, I want to show you some satellite data. This was yesterday, just as the sun was setting here. Take a look at this fire that is kind of north. Well, here's Los Angeles, like kind of the massive metro area of Los Angeles and the surrounding communities. And you can just see this extremely large wildfire that's putting out a lot of smoke over Southern California right now. In fact, if I just take you and kind of give you more of a continental view here, you'll see early this morning, of course, we're going to talk more about Francine here in just a few moments. But yesterday, that wildfire smoke, just widespread here, but also across much of the Midwest. So this has just been an ongoing story we've been trying to keep track of here as the Western United States fires continue. I believe we're up to 6.9 million acres burned so far this year in the United States. So just a quick stat to give you there. But of course, a lot of attention needs to go here to Francine. And by the way, I'm trying a new browser. I was having some trouble with Chrome, as many of you know in my videos. So hopefully I'm not as clumsy with this. But let's get a quick look this morning at some radar data. Now, one of the things that I've been quite concerned about is that before Francine even gets to the Louisiana coast, there's already been a tremendous amount of rain in this area, and we can see here some of the precipitation that preceded this particular event. In fact, over the last 48 hours, as you watch the eye of Francine approaching, which it should be onshore later on this afternoon, if you just take a look at the last 48 hours alone, we can see already some places picking up a couple of inches of rain. And remember, Florida for the last few weeks, in fact, take a look at the last couple of weeks. From that whole region along the Gulf Coast over to Florida, we have several locations here that have grabbed over 10 inches of rainfall. So this is all preceding the of course, tropical system known as Francine, which is a hurricane now. And that's why early this morning we do have widespread, flood watches, flood warnings that are in place, storm surge warnings, hurricane warnings. It's all right here in Louisiana. And this has been something that's been important to pay attention to. You've noticed that more of this has shifted farther to the east, and that was something we talked about yesterday, that it seemed as though there was some dry air intrusion, plus the way the winds were behaving in the mid and upper levels were going to push this system a bit farther to the east with its greatest effects. But while Francine goes right up the Mississippi River here, take a look throughout the west. We have a wind event that's happening in the west we need to have a discussion about here because we've got strong winds coming out of the plains, red flag warnings throughout the part of the western plains you see here, and then back into the kind of Great Basin region all the way up into Idaho. And there's also air quality issues here as well, which you can see in California and also in Oregon. But back to the tropical system, if we just have a look here at the next or today's risk of excessive rainfall, pretty large region here that's under the moderate risk, and this extends into Mississippi, Alabama, and over toward the Panhandle. Tomorrow, this gets a bit farther to the north. Remember, on Thursday, we were expecting, Francine's remnants to be making it almost to the Bootheel of Missouri, and we're just going to have to watch that carefully. And some of the newest updates from our models, this is the WPC forecast for total precip. And I just want to make that point again. Take a look at that western edge. We were expecting this to be pretty sharp, and now you can see that. So that was just following up on some comments I made earlier in the week. But the WPC's got a pretty large region here of over 5 inches of rain, and I would not be surprised if storm total, including the preceding moisture that's been in this area, tops about 12 to 15 inches in places, which means when you go back over the last 30 days, we're going to have some places that are over 30 inches once Francine is done along the Gulf Coast here in Louisiana. Keeping a closer look at this, let's just get an idea on Francine's projected path. So this is the newest update this morning from the National Hurricane Center. It will maintain hurricane strength. In fact, let's see if they've got a new observation in here. They don't. So it was at 90 miles an hour, putting this at a Cat 1. I think most forecasts are attempting to take this to Category 2 at landfall, and you can see where they have the hurricane warnings currently stretched out here. Storm surge, peak storm surge forecast is 5 to 10 feet along the coastline. And just kind of a comment here about the trajectory of this system. So just remember the hurricane's coming in like this, and so it's always on the right-hand side that the greatest storm surge exists. That's where you have both the rotation of the storm system itself and its forward motion adding together. We may end up seeing, as the hurricane goes by, some of the water getting pulled out here once the hurricane gets on shore. So you have some preceding storm surge, and then once the hurricane gets on shore, you can tend to pull the water away. One important thing about Louisiana, of course, is historically famous for massive storm surge events. And the worst possible trajectory for a system to come through would be something just like this. And that's what Hurricane Katrina did. So what you ended up having is you have the storm surge on the right side getting focused into the bay, and that's what ended up flooding Lake Pontchartrain in here as well. So this would be the worst trajectory. Francine is coming in like this. Now, that's not to take anything away from Francine, but there's just kind of a quick comparison there for us. So another way to look at this is the National Hurricane Center actually puts out intensity forecasts as well. And on Tomer Berg's website, which I use all the time, he maps it. And I'm going to start mapping this as well for you and put it on my site. But you can actually see the strength that's projected. So we do expect this to be at a Category 2 by later this afternoon before this makes landfall. Now, what's interesting about the trajectory of this before we dig into the winds and how much rainfall we're expecting is just take a look at what some of the new forecast models are doing. So they're taking this, again, this afternoon, by this evening, running into parts of Mississippi and farther to the north. Now, once it gets here to the Mid-South, some of the forecast models don't know what to do with it. See, this just kind of lingers there. There's no mid and upper level shove on this system to move it away from this area. Remember that large ridge we've been talking about all week that's sitting over the Great Lakes and to the north? Well, that's just stagnant flow. And now you can start to see that some of the forecast members are just dropping it right back down. So what this is going to do is produce a flooding thread here that's going to eventually move back toward the south and east, increasing the rainfall totals there as well. And I wanted to have a good look at this in terms of the winds and also in terms of the total precipitation. So I want you to get a look at 3 different systems here. This is Francine coming in, so let's walk that back again and see it. And remember, at the same time, there's this deep low that's coming out of the northwest, producing the wind event that's going to be in the northern plains. Now this evening, or not this evening, in a couple hours here, I'm going to fly out to Minnesota. I got a couple events near Minneapolis tomorrow. And I'll be kind of tucked in between this, but it should be interesting just to see how all of this affects travel across the United States here. Because then following it, we do have another system that the models continue to produce here off the southeast coast of the Carolinas. And some of the stronger winds from that are expected to get into the Carolinas with gusts 30, 40 miles an hour, maybe press into parts of the mid-Atlantic or the Northeast. So let's just do this. I'm going to grab this image. Let's just go ahead and open it in a new tab. And let's take a look at a few different regions. So you'll have access to all of this sooner once I'm finished building the HTML. So let's get down here to the southeast. So take note, we're going to have gusts here clearly into parts of southern Louisiana that are going to be in the 50 to 90 mile an hour range, probably 100-mile gusts just along the coast. We're going to keep those 40 to 50 mile an hour gusts pretty far inland, though, as you see. Then the other system that comes here and forms off of the Carolina coast, that's, again, we're looking at extended winds. Again, we'll get the timing of this better in a few moments, but those winds coming in here to the Carolinas getting over the 40 to 50 mile an hour range possible as well. Let's now flip this to a north-central United States view so you can see the strength of the winds coming into the plains. And, there's a lot of wide open area here. And given the trajectory of these winds, there's going to be some crosswinds on our interstates, which could make travel a bit tough here. But you can see we're expecting 40 mile an hour wind gusts out of the next, both of the next 2 systems that are coming through. Okay, I want to zoom back in on the southeast and show you total precipitation. So as we play this forward, let's just get the entirety of these next 2 systems out of the model here. And let's just take it out. That's about a full week from now. And just take note, we've got widespread 3 to 5 inches of rain here, according to the European. The European, remember, is the model that takes this up and brings it right back to northern Alabama. This is all area that's been in drought. I mean, this whole area has been in drought. And so to see this putting down, look at the color bar, look at the numbers. 6-7 inches of rain is possible. Same thing for parts of Georgia as well. And then you see that other system, which we're going to show you the timing of that in a few moments, possibly bring in an extremely heavy rain into South Carolina as we go forward. And to be honest, if these rains could have fallen a month ago, this would have been an entirely different story this year with respect to the drought that's just widespread in this area right now. So we would certainly call this drought busting in that regard. I also want to take a quick look at some probability maps. So these are the chances of getting certain amounts of rain. We're going to start off at the 1-inch level. And this is the chance of getting an inch over the next 10 days. Let's kind of stretch this out to 2 inches. And again, very, very heavy rain down here. And 4, you're going to start to see those pockets showing up. Now, don't forget, we have 2 systems that are coming through the Pacific Northwest and rolling right through this area. So we've got Out of Montana into southern Alberta, central Saskatchewan, northern Manitoba, chances for extremely heavy rainfall as well. What I want to do is I want to take a moment just to kind of assess what that's going to look like and get into the upper level hype pattern here. So we're going to use the artificial intelligence. I've been most impressed with its ability to pick up on these things. So we see that deeper trough diving in. This is Thursday getting into Friday. This is what helps pull Francine to the north. And remember, not going anywhere, because to the north of it, there's a big blocking ridge. And this is almost a high over low pattern. So you see high over low patterns are blocking, which means they don't move west or east. They're just going to sit there. And so this one's not going to have much of a chance to move. So by Friday, getting into Saturday and Sunday, we still see the lingering effects of that trough as the next deep low comes into the northwest and almost follows the same trajectory. This is followed by a third system the AI model's been talking about. It's also in the other models as well. We're out there to next Thursday morning that dives all the way into California and comes into the central plains of the United States. We're going to look at that one for moisture. But this will be about the time when we see this low developing here. It's about a week from now off the Carolina coast that sits there and lingers. So this pattern's pretty active. And as we get out there pretty far with it, what do we see? We go back to where we've been. Troughs in this area, quick moving troughs through the Great Lakes. That's been something we've been talking about what feels like for a few weeks now. So with all of that, let's walk through our models on total precip and just look at a national view here. Here's the WPC, okay, next 7 days. This is the NBM next 7 days. Again, it's these two main areas we've been thinking about here. This is the artificial intelligence next 7 days. This would be the GFS. And again, I will be rewriting this code over the next couple of weeks to go with the yellow numbers. I got a couple of other great suggestions I might try out as well, but we're going to flip them all over to that. And then finally here is the high-res European model. All right, so this is kind of just giving us that look that we've been trying to concentrate on here. So thinking this through, let's talk about our risk of strong to severe storms. This is the today's Storm Prediction Center outlook, so we do have to be aware that on the eastern side or the right-hand side of this northward moving hurricane, we're going to have ideal wind shear conditions to give us rotation, which means we could be looking at some small tornado spin-ups here, plus just intense thunderstorms. But take a look at the northwest as the first low ejects, a broad area here. We have risk of strong storms. Tomorrow, Montana. This is when the system's fully developed, moving into the southern Canadian prairie. And then again here, down in parts of Florida and Alabama. As we get up to day 3, we'll probably watch this map evolve quite a bit. But it's going to be the tail end of the main impacts of Francine, and then the first low is finally way up in Canada. So there might be a greater risk of storms in Canada that's not being shown on this map. But just to get an idea about it, let's go look at the high-res NAM. So we play this through and we see that according to the NAM, the eye wall should be along the Louisiana coast late this afternoon. Maybe they're a bit earlier than this, but this is what the NAM is picking up on. Widespread rain out ahead of it. But by this evening, look at the storm system rolling through the northwest. A lot of storms in the northwest that pull out of Idaho into Montana. And this is going to, of course, increase the winds in this area and then increase the winds in the plains as this ejects. So we've already seen those winds and their forecast. We then watch these two lows kind of spin up. One goes into Canada, the other one goes toward the MidSouth, and that gets us out there to Friday. We need to pick this up by going over to the high-res European model and just kind of get us queued up with that same spot. So there's early Friday morning, and you're going to watch one low move into parts of Canada, the next one here, Francine, the remnants of it over the Mid-South, and then Francine doesn't really go anywhere. It just sits there and creates more precipitation. And, around it, we could get some monsoonal moisture down in the Four Corner states. The model did pick up on something interesting happening here, a little shortwave trying to sneak around the base of the broader trough. This would be Sunday night in parts of Kansas and Oklahoma, but I'm not too hopeful on these rains right now. And then, like I said, next Monday, Tuesday, see the low forming here? And that one is expected. Watch the European model pull that Monday night into Tuesday into North Carolina, South Carolina, right there with some heavy rain. And this is timed with the next big low that comes in the northwest. And so where does it go? Same place. Two lows in a whoops, let's get rid of that. Two lows in a row, one going here now, the second one early next week following the same trajectory. And that's why this region has such a high chance of getting some wet weather. I would love it if we could get the moisture into this region. We've got to see better rainfall getting into this part of the Ohio Valley, Eastern Great Lakes, given how dry it's been as of late. So we'll need to see how well this performs in terms of getting that moisture into that area. But that's kind of our quick look here at the high-res European model and its forecast. Week 2, remember you can find all this on agweather.com. There they are stretched out. The CPC, the European Ensemble, the Artificial Intelligence, and the GFS Ensemble, and they've all got that second system right here, while the system that's over the southeast continues to spin its way out next week. So that's it. Those are our two big systems. If you're tucked in between, we get a chance to dry out here a bit. I did make a map just to kind of show the importance of these systems. I made this from my report yesterday. We can see a lot of the Ohio River Valley, the Mississippi Basin here, and the Missouri Basin so very dry when we look down there at 100 centimeters soil moisture. We got pockets in the northwest too that could really use this moisture as this comes through, just thinking about the hydrology of this whole system. If I had to think about who's going to miss, it's probably going to be this part of Texas into Oklahoma, where we've had some drought development as of late, miss out on this. But we've got to get some moisture back into the plain. So I'm watching that system next week, which will be critical for undoing some of this long-standing dry subsurface soil moisture issue. Same thing for the kind of eastern corn belt here. The Mississippi River, as you know, is about 7 feet below low stage, so Francine is going to go a long way to kind of help ameliorate that drought problem we've been having as of late. Let's switch over and talk about temperatures next. Frost threat, it's mainly going to be with the cold air coming into the west. We can get a good look at that here. So here's today's highs compared to average. You see the influence of the ridge, right? But if you're under that cloud cover here or with the system coming through the northwest, that's where it's cold. But everywhere else, quite a bit of warm air. Saturday into Sunday. This is Monday into Tuesday. Next trough digs in. We're still dealing with the cloud cover here. This is also when the low moves into the Carolinas next Monday, Tuesday. So that's why we got cooler air in this place as well. I'd expect these temperatures to drop off a bit when we finally see where that low is going to go. So what about week 2? I don't know. I like this view just because it shows you ECMWF, GFS. You can just step back and see the pattern. But if we just kind of have a look here, there's the cold air with the next system coming into the west. That's pretty chilly air here. And if we go back and have a look at day 10 through 15, we've got a good look at it as well. From there, I want to dig into the longer range now. So we've kind of got this near-term forecast out of the way. I mentioned yesterday that I felt like the what's called the Western Pacific Oscillation is dominant, right? We looked at the MJO, we looked at all these factors, and I said, I think this is it. I think this is where the pattern is. And it might stay here for a little bit. Fall is known for having stuck patterns. The pattern right now, it's moving, but it's being dominated by the lows that are in the Bering Sea. There's a ridge to the south right now. And so this looks very similar to this. All that warmth you just saw when I showed you, this temperature, that's under that ridge where we are drier and warmer. Bermuda High has shifted a bit east. It's closer to like the Cape Verde Islands and the Azores. So any new tropical development might stay out to open ocean unless we can cook up another system here in the Gulf of Mexico. But that's where we expect the pressure trough to live. You can just kind of see it right in through here. But this pattern tends to dip lows into the west coast, which you now saw 3 of them coming in the next 10 days. So I feel as though the WPO is really a major contributor to this current pattern. And we looked at the European model, but I'll just show you this. The CFSV2 is kind of on board, keeping that around late September into early October as well, meaning that overall we see a more mild forecast as we stretch this out. Now, the CPC, we brought this up yesterday, has a similar forecast, right? Where those lows dip in, we're wetter, we're dry around the Great Lakes under the ridge. The southeast is the wild card. But we do tend to keep near normal to cooler than normal temperatures west and quite a bit of warmth in the central United States, Great Lakes, southeast, south, this whole region, the eastern 2/3 of the U.S., with this pattern as well. I also annotated a map from my report yesterday looking at the tropics, because certainly the MJO's current position is putting more suppression over the central Pacific, kind of taking the lid off of things in the Atlantic. But if the Bermuda High's here, most of the storm systems will likely curl around it and maybe not hit the United States as they form. We do have another area right now here that's got a 70% chance of developing. You've probably seen recently the flooding along Africa's Sahel. That's the boundary kind of land between the desert to the north and the rainforest to the south. We also would be watching carefully for that desert bloom given all the rains that have moved into this part of the Saharan desert. But if we do not get another system developing here from mid-September to mid-October, which is the kind of the first month on the second half of the hurricane season, then this area will likely be drier. That's what the WPO signal is kind of conveying overall. So I'm just trying to blend together some of the ideas we painted on Monday and Tuesday of this week. So from there, let's go out and just look at the forecast again for September 15 to October 15 by focusing in on the U.S. So I just kind of stitched the two images together so you can see them here. And this is a positive WPO forecast if I've ever seen one. And that seems to be where the pattern's going. So what I'm going to do now is I want to stretch this out a bit. I want to talk a bit more about some longer range things, some bigger picture things. And we're going to start with this a year ago. 1 year ago in late August, we were talking about El Niño. Here's other things we were discussing, but it was mostly a discussion about El Niño's formation, and the forecast, remember, a year ago in August was for a super Niño. Now, we missed that. It wasn't even close. It was much weaker. Well, let me rephrase that. It was still a strong El Niño, but it wasn't this strong. And a year ago, we were thinking about what the forecast meant for our upcoming winter, which overall painted a bit of a drier situation in the Northwest, wetter in California, which some of that certainly came true. Wetter along the south, we did break drought there. Remember the big snows that happened in Iowa last year, or the blizzards that came through the plains? That verified. We were at times a bit drier in the eastern Corn Belt, but this really panned out, the temperature forecast. There was almost no winter last winter across the northern tier of the United States. And to say we were cooler than average across the south didn't pan out either. But remember, a little cooler than normal in the south in winter isn't much to talk about. So that was a year ago. It was all about what was going on, with the development of El Niño. And even the NOAA forecast, which is seen here, mimicked it. We were concerned about if a winter was coming, it was going to be late. And it didn't even show up late. It just didn't show up at all. We had maybe, one cold week. So I'm bringing all of that up because right now we don't have that. We are developing a La Niña. We've spent a lot of time lately just talking about the development of that La Niña and what it may mean as we go forward. And while this is happening, we still have the warm water in the North Pacific. A huge area of very hot water. And that's what's playing a contrast here between the Bering Sea issue I mentioned with the positive phase of the WPO. That's why I brought that slide up a few moments ago. Now, the difference is with the building of a La Niña, we get into a different forecast entirely. And so what I'm showing you here is the new European model. It came out last week. You've already seen it, but let's look at it again. Fall and winter forecasts. Now, we'll look at the temperatures in a moment, but I want to point out that the fall precipitation pattern and the winter precipitation pattern is very La Niña look. It's almost the opposite of what we saw, not opposite in full regard, but it's very different from what we saw a year ago. And the NMME is right on board with it. These are the probabilities of staying drier and wetter. And this is just screaming, La Niña. Now, we know that this La Niña is not forecast to be super strong, which means it may not dominate the entirety of winter. But if you said, Eric, give me a general idea about winter, I'd say that these precipitation patterns are most likely, given what we know here at the beginning of September. What is interesting about the temperature forecast is I think the CFSV2 might have this closer to right. A mild fall, and as we approach winter, let's just look at December, January, February, I think the jet stream is going to do this. Normally we can get, a stronger subtropical bit of the jet, but I think this year it's going to be weak and it's going to stay south. So could we divide the country north-south on who's going to be warmer than average and who's cooler? Yeah. I think the Pacific has a jet that comes up, dives in like this, and leaves like that. That would be your typical La Niña pattern, and that may mean that we could get some legitimate winter into the northern plains of the United States, and at times, colder air that gets all the way to the Gulf Coast, unlike a year ago where that just didn't happen. So how do you interpret this? What I'm saying is this year has a better chance at being a normal winter than we saw last year. Last year we didn't have a winter. So that's where I currently sit on this. South America, this was the forecast a year ago. And we watched much of Brazil's northern growing area settle into a 3-month historic drought, October, November, December, while there was major flooding south. And that verified. That's exactly what happened last year. In Argentina, with the building in of El Niño a year ago, broke a 3-year drought. Now, we don't have that this year. We're back into the other side of this. And that's why the newest forecast for October, November, December has a little bit of dryness in like Tocantins and Para, but most of Brazil is expected to have normal rains in October that last through November and December. So no major predictions for drought. Even Argentina is not even predicted to be super dry, although there's concerns about a lack of subsoil moisture right now. But as you know, it's trying to rain down there. Take a look at the global pattern here. It's wet from Paraguay, southern Brazil, Uruguay, Argentina. No monsoonal signal yet, but we know one is coming. We know that we're going to be developing that. Elsewhere around the world, just take a look at the activity going across the Sahel. This is still, on hyperactive mode. You then see still dryness in Western Russia, but much more rain in Eastern Europe. In fact, I was talking last night with a friend of mine from Ukraine, and he was calling home, and we were just discussing the split from Europe, the split across Ukraine, how much wetter the eastern side has been lately versus the western. And you can certainly see that. Boy, I got my directions wrong there. How much wetter the western side has been to the eastern side here of Ukraine. Just want to point that out. And while the MJO lives over here, we're just going to see a lot more kind of push for moisture in this area. So that's just kind of the bigger picture thing I wanted to talk about. And I'll just show you one last map to finish this up. And it is kind of our global temperature pattern. I'll let you kind of look at that one as we wrap this up. But hopefully that offers a little bit better of an explanation as to what's going on with, with the differences from last year's forecast for winter for the northern hemisphere and this year's. And you can also see the southern hemisphere differences too. Okay, that's it. Have a good rest of your day, and we'll talk tomorrow. Thanks.